your process to turn the page from a game like Sunday and look forward and get ready for the next one?
Well, it's the same as always. I think you study the film, you figure out where we can get better, and you just move forward. I think it's a lot of season left, a lot of great things ahead of us. We got a tough challenge this week, really good defense, and so a lot of maturity on their defense, a lot of experience. So we got to be ready to roll. There's no time to wait.
What is the area that stuck out most to you in terms of where you'd like to see improvement this week?
Well, I think we had some great opportunities. I think that we didn't convert on some plays that we felt like we should have, and that kind of put us behind the eight ball a little bit. And then I think just ultimately, we just got to play a little better. We got to play a little sharper. And when we get down the red zone, we got to score. Those are the things. It's nothing crazy, overly complicated. I think that's really it.
As defense, you've seen a lot of those guys a number of times over the years. Just what stands out when you look at that?
Well, I'm trying to think how many times have we played there? I feel like we played a bunch there. Fifth time only. I think we played them like 10 times, over the past several years. So I've been able to see a lot of those guys. I've played Luke since college days in the NC State versus Boston College. So there's a lot of great players in that defense. I think that the experience that they have, like I said, I think that we've been able to see them. We got also a lot of young guys that haven't played those guys. So what I do know, they're a very aggressive defense. They got a great defensive line, great linebackers, great corners and safeties and stuff like that. So we got to be really sharp. We got to be on our stuff. We got to be in tune with what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. Be in attack mode and try to find a way to get a huge win on the road. Every time we go there, it's always a battle. It seems like so. It always comes down the wire. So we have to be prepared for that too.
Has it been harder to get the ball downfield the last couple of games at all? Just plays in the passing game?
I think we got to be a little bit more aggressive just in general. I think just to be able to get there and find those plays. We've been able to run the ball really well. Minnesota in particular is probably the game that was probably the toughest to get the ball down the field, I would say, just because they played so far deep. And that's why we were able to run it for so many yards, just because there's nobody really, once you get past the first level. So that was kind of their thought process and decision, I think. So we want to be versatile. I think we want to get Tyler going. We want to get guys like Josh going and different players and DK. Get those guys. Demo is such a great player too as well. So get those guys the ball as much as we can too.
Pete mentioned a little bit about having you release the ball more quickly and facing the pass rush. What did film study show you about the Rams game?
I think we could get the ball out a couple seconds earlier, a second or two earlier. I think that they did a good job of rushing, and they have such a great pass rusher. So I think just finding our plays throughout the game, where we can do that. I think sometimes you got there's always this happy medium, right? I mean, and a lot of people want us to throw the ball deep, and then they want us to throw it short, and then they want us. So I think there's just that's just I think at the end of the day with that game in particular. Each game has its own history, and I think that the reality with that game is we just didn't make the plays that we wanted to. And if we can do that, I think we got to give ourselves a great chance to win.
How do you feel like the pass protection has been over the last couple weeks?
Pass protection has been working. I think that we've throughout that game we had a couple sacks there trying to find a play. They had the one near the end of the game, and they had one that was right before half, unfortunately, that we were trying to take a look down the field. So. They did a good job. They're gonna be able to get to us every once in a while with that pass rush. But I think that the guys have been fighting and doing a great job up front, especially in the run game in particular, and be able to rush for 250 yards against the Vikings, a team that's very hard to run the ball against. I thought we ran the ball really well against the Rams too, when we were able to. But the problem was that we were fighting from behind so far, and we couldn't catch up.
You've been hurt and sick a little bit the last few weeks, but how big of a boost would it be for you guys to get Tyler back rocking and rolling at this point?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler's a huge part of our offense. We want to get him going, throughout the game and just get him the football. He's such a special player, So, you definitely notice him on the field when he's making those plays, And so we got so many guys that can make so many plays that we need to continue to find the way to get them the ball and do those special things that they can do.
Watching Tyler in the last few practices, do you feel like he's back at 100% before the leg bruise and the sickness?
Yeah, I think Tyler's ready to roll 100%. He looks fresh and ready to play some great football. So we got a 3-game push right here. One game at a time, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. And everything that we want is ahead of us. We're 10-3, and there's no time for woe is me or anything like that. We're ready to roll, and we're looking forward to the opportunity of finding ways to win and get into the playoffs hopefully and hopefully go a long way.
So as a leader, how do you keep, if that happens, guys from trying to press too much, having what happened last game and then this game, but just kind of get him to be just play, let's execute, let's be us?
Yeah, I think we've been able to do that all year. We went on a 5-game winning streak. Hopefully, we can go on another 5 or 6 or 7-game winning streak, and that's just the reality. I think it's been done before. We lost a game. I think that's the unfortunate part about sports. Sometimes you may lose 1 or 2, but the good thing is we can win a lot too as well. And so I think that we've been able to do that all year. I think that we the best way to do it is focus on one game at a time. Like I said, I think each game has a history to itself. You have to realize that each game has its own history, and just realize that hopefully we can find a way to play great in this game, and then let that add up and give us momentum for the next one, and so on.
When you did
Rashad, without Rashad, what can you or do you do to help CJ or Travis work into that mix?
Well, obviously we're going to miss Penny. He was really catching fire there and just doing a great job running the football for us. So it's unfortunate, we've had a few of those guys. We had Dis, we had obviously Britt. And just watching those guys go down, it's always tough, just because they are really playing great. First of all, second of all, it's just because those are your guys, so. I think with CJ though, we got a great football player in him. He can really do a lot of great things. When he's been healthy, he's been spectacular. So, he can really run it. He can catch it. He's got great vision. He does a great job in pass protection. So I got all the confidence in the world in what he can do. Homer too. He's been special all year for us, and special teams, and coming in the game and making plays all over the field. He was a great running back in college too. So he's been really, really on his stuff. He's very professional. So those two guys will be ready to roll. And obviously we have Chris Carson in the backfield, who's a 1,000-yard rusher and just a guy who can really make a lot of plays too as well.
When you did the grad transfer thing at NC State, did you think that could become as common as it has become?
It's funny because Mark and I have been talking about that, a couple months ago actually. We didn't know it was going to become that popular. I think it's a good thing though. And the reason why I say it's a good thing is because, to be honest with you, I think kids going to college, wanting to obviously go to that university and play great there. But if something happens, it also gives them a little bit of motivation to graduate early. For me, my whole motivation to graduate early is because my dad, I made a promise to my dad when he was sick, and he had just got his leg amputated and everything else, and I told him that I was going to try to graduate in 3 years, and so he was like, he told me, he said, son, I want you to graduate in 3 years. So I was like, okay, I got it. Yes, sir, and so I took 18 credits every semester, even throughout the summer, both semesters throughout the summer, and just worked my tail off to try to give myself a chance, one, to graduate and get a great education, two, is to give myself a chance if I ever played, pro baseball or pro football or whatever, that I'd already have graduated. And so for me, I had no idea that was going to happen. That just naturally, by the grace of God, it just worked out that way. And I remember Mark, telling me that rule, when I'm thinking I'm still going to go to NC State, he's like, at the very end, he's like, if they don't want you to play football, really, then maybe you do this. And he said, I looked it up and everything else, you can transfer because you graduated. And I'm like, really? And so that was my last case scenario in my head at the time. Worst case scenario, to be honest with you, in my head. And sure enough, it ended up working out that way, and it became one of the greatest blessings too at the same time, because I went to a great school, NC State, and then got to go to Wisconsin, meet amazing people, got have a time in my life too as well, and play great football, and I'm here today. So. I think that, like I said, I think it's the transfer rule and everything else has been a blessing for a lot of guys, and a lot of girls too as well. And I think it's been a thing that, it should encourage kids to graduate. It's a good thing.
What was it like just emotionally being in NC State for so long and then being in a new environment?
Well, I think that when I was in the midst of it all, it was very emotional. It was very tough, having to leave NC State at the time. And, I was playing baseball too as well. I remember I was sitting in Rome, Georgia, at a Holiday Inn. I was about to play the Atlanta Braves organization that night. And I was on the 3rd floor, and I'll never forget it. And I remember that phone call like it was yesterday. And so I think for me, it was definitely very tough, pretty emotional. I remember that same day, though, I just hit BP. It's about 4 o'clock, and I got a call from Auburn Tigers, later that afternoon. And this call started coming in, and so it was just amazing, just the transition. And, okay, you know what, like sometimes you got to move on, and so I think that I had an amazing time at NC State. Like I said, I think, at the time it was really tough, but as I look back at it now, I think God was preparing me for something. I think the reason why I say that is because my dad was extremely sick. When I went to college, my first year, my freshman year, he was healthy before then and everything else. He had diabetes, but he was healthy. And as soon as I got there, he had to get his leg amputated and, suffered a coma, was in a coma for, 3 weeks, and it was really heavy, but I was only 2 hours and 30 minutes away. So I used to drive back home on the low on Thursday nights, Fridays sometimes, and see my dad. And so I was in the right place at the right time. And by the grace of God, he got to come to some games, a couple games, even though he couldn't really walk and couldn't really see much and couldn't really do much and talk much. I remember him coming to my University of Miami game my freshman year. I think he snuck out of the hospital. True story. That's another story for you. He came to UNC Chapel Hill. I remember playing there, and him coming to that game. And they told me he was not going to live any longer. And so it was an emotional time, but it was the right time. It was the right time. And then when I went to Wisconsin, it prepared me for this. It prepared me, NC State did too, but it prepared me just for the transition of, 6 months, 6 months of, just focusing, getting there. I literally left baseball on June 27th, got to University of Wisconsin July 1st, early that morning around 6 a.m. I drove a U-Haul all the way up, got there. Funny thing, I pulled up and parked my car on Breeze Street, which is, Drew Brees is one of my favorite players. I'm like, this is kind of ironic. And parked at Camp Randall, and the rest was kind of history. I just started studying from that day. And for 3 weeks, I wanted to learn the whole playbook and be ready to play and try to play great. You couldn't get much help either because of all the NCAA rules and coaches and being away and everything else. And so my head was down. I remember guys like Nick Toon and Abadaris and Zeitler and Ricky Wagner and Travis Frederick and Peter Kahns and those guys, Monty Balls of the world, James White, Melvin Gordon. I remember all of us working out together, training together, getting ready to play ball together. And that brought me a lot of peace in that transition. Those guys did. And Paul Chris too. So it worked out the way it was supposed to. And I think that by the grace of God, I was able to be drafted in baseball and all that, and go through that process, but also get to do what I believe that God had destined me to do. And that was play football.
Along those lines, what do you think about the current trend of players skipping their bowl games?
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I don't like skipping games. I don't like the idea of skipping bowl games and all that. That's a personal decision, I guess. To me, as a player, I'm a competitor. So there's no such thing as games skipped. So every practice, every play, I'm playing. So that's kind of my mentality. But it's worked for some guys for sure. I think it's a health thing and worry thing. But you play it all year, you got that far. So I think that. By that point, the hay's in the barn in a sense. If people really believe in you, they're going to believe in you by that point. But that's just my opinion.
One more on transferring. When you made that decision, do you remember what the reaction was, or did you get any blowback over that?
From like,
fans or from anybody that you heard?
No, yeah, I remember. Let's see here. So it was that game, like I said to you, it was Rome George playing that night. I was starting at second base, and it was 4 o'clock, and it hit up. I was literally hitting BP, and it popped up on the big screen, as I'm hitting, and so that was kind of interesting, and just it really. It was a crazy process. I let it go in the locker room. 15 minutes later, I got a phone call on my phone, and I probably had 7-8 different phone calls within 20 minutes from different schools and stuff. Kind of crazy process, to be honest with you, and just I think that there wasn't any negativity. I loved NC State. It was an amazing time for me, and it was a thing that I got to graduate early. Had some amazing teachers, amazing guys I got to play with in football and baseball, and some amazing people I got to be around and everything else. And I left it all on the field every time. That's what I do now. And same thing in the classroom. And so for me, it was just a time that there's a time and place for everything, and it was a time for me to be ready, be prepared to move on. And I think Mark helped prepare me for that too, my brother. We talked about the pros and cons of, the schools and this school and that school, and then at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm still playing baseball. So it's like, okay, am I going to play baseball the rest of my life? So that was probably the hardest battle after figuring out what school I'm going to go to. It's like okay, it's going to be football, it's going to be baseball, it's going to be both. What does that look like? And so that was really the harder challenge, to be honest with you.
You said on the big screen, it was just the announcement that you were.
Yeah, it was ESPN. ESPN. Transferring. So that was interesting.
When you watch football,
football for fun these days. Is there one player that you really like watching that isn't an ex-teammate?
That isn't an ex-teammate. Yeah, I mean, quarterback-wise or just any player? Yeah, I mean, my favorite player to watch is Drew Brees. Got to know him over the years and stuff like that. He's my favorite guy to watch and just study and everything else. Man, there's some obviously great receivers, guys who make plays. I mean, I just love watching playmakers, you know, and there's some amazing defensive ends, you know, you get to watch, you know, guys like Vaughn and guys like Khalil Mack, you know, guys who rush the quarterback. They're pretty impressive just watching the tenacity that they rush with. You know, but there's a lot of guys, you know, and even in our own division, you know, there's a lot of great players too. So, but my favorite player to watch is Drew. I would say Tom too. Watching him play is always, you know, just watching the clutch part of him and stuff like that.
Russell, you spoke about the frequency of this Seahawks-Panthers matchup. I mean, what do you think it's going to be like on Sunday? Is it going to be kind of weird not seeing Ron Rivera there or Cam Newton not playing? Or I mean, what do you think? How many battles you've had over the years against those guys?
Well, Cam has been such a tremendous quarterback for so many years, you know. So we've had a lot of, you know, tough battles back and forth. I mean, I think of all the games we've played against each other, and you know, he's been such a special player. One for that organization, but just for the NFL and just as a player, just in general, and what he means to kids, you know, and people, you know, just around the world and stuff like that. He's been great. So in that sense, so you know, I think that. You know, so it'll be interesting to see, you know, what happens with him, to be honest with you. I think that he's such a great player, still is. And then Coach Ron Rivera, I've gotten to know him, you know, from a distance a little bit, and just over time, you know, obviously playing against him, but also outside of the field. And just he's an amazing person. Seems always like a great coach, obviously a ball player, and you know, I think a lot of guys looked up to him and stuff like that too. So it seemed like so. Yeah, it's definitely going to be different.
Anything else? Thanks, Russ.
Thank you guys. Go Hawks.